Hello and welcome back to Shite Talk, the Irish history podcast. My name's Kevin Lurney, and I've decided that we're ready. We've moved up in the world. We're now the Irish history podcast.
What? Anne, you pressure, Kevin.
We are the Irish history podcast now. I've decided.
I never signed up for that. I signed up to be a lowly scholar. No one would have to find out about this. I wouldn't even have to tell my ma about the podcast. It would never come back to me.
You're in the kitchen, man, now. You're in the heat. Anne knows about the podcast. Your dad knows about the podcast.
Well, tell me, if I don't like it, can I get out of it?
No. If you don't like the heat, then you're stuck in the kitchen. You know the old phrase.
I can't handle it, Kevin. I can't handle it.
I know. Listen, you're out of the fire and into the firing squad. I don't know. I'm not good at maxims, but basically, we're it. We're the podcast now.
Also, I suppose if I couldn't handle the heat, I wouldn't live somewhere where it's 40 degrees.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It's been a big month since June was a big month. You moved house.
I did. What else happened in June? Restrictions for COVID were somewhat lifted.
Somewhat. The whole world went into a Black Lives Matter protest.
And the Irish comedy scene fell to its knees.
Oh yeah, there was sexual assault scandals in the Irish comedy scene.
Now, I haven't been around for any of that.
No. So,
Kevin, I'm going to put all the pressure on you to do Shite Talk's rebuttal or our hot take on the whole issue.
Well, did you listen to Brian and James's podcast?
I did.
Yeah.
Brian O'Toole and James Cadden. That's a good podcast for anyone out there.
There's the best one I listened to give an overview of the story. What happened was there was a man called Davy Riley who ran a comedy club in town. And he was always championed as one of the good guys in comedy, someone who ran a safe club. But then some women came forward and it turns out he's done a lot of fucked up stuff to a lot of different women. And he copped to it on Twitter, and that kind of set the ball rolling with a lot of people coming forward about other dickheads on the Irish comedy scene.
Yeah, or one in particular, I guess, of what I saw online, but I don't know if what's allowed to be said in terms of broadcast, if these are on running things in court or not. Let's just say some things have gone a bit loco back in Ireland.
Yes, yeah. I think that man has been asked to step down. But, well, in the wake of the stuff that came out about Davy Riley and then allegations about other comics, a lot of people made fairly... Have you been reading all the statements and stuff that came out of all the comedy clubs promising to make the scene better and do better?
To be honest, I haven't, because it's one of those things where, yeah, it's grand coming out saying it now, but this is the kind of stuff that I don't mean just about Davy, but about the fact that there's been names around the Irish comedy scene for a couple of years. The fact that it's been talked about now, but this is the kind of stuff that even as open micers you'd hear people openly discussing.
Yeah.
But then nothing was being done about it. So I don't want to say it's people on their high horses now, but for sure, if I knew about it as an open micer, then people at the head of the scene would have known about it a long time ago. So it's grand saying it now, but look back at yourselves from the last 10 years or whatever, however long this shit's been going on.
Yeah. Well, I've seen a fair few statements. I saw a statement from a guy who runs a club who I've seen him be fairly openly, is said, is fairly racist. And then, Ruth Hunter is a sound woman, good comic, and she's been trying to pass around sort of good code of conduct, sort of good guidelines you could follow with your club. So he made this post about this is disgusting. I'd never let anything happen like this under my roof. And then she posted the conduct and was like, have you implemented any of these things? Perhaps this would be a good thing to read through in order to make your club a safer place. And he was just like, fuck off. Nothing bad has ever happened in my club. Nothing bad ever will. I've seen a lot of, it seems to have been a trend where people be like, we are here for you, we are going to stand by all these women, and then as soon as anyone says anything, they'll be like, well, nothing bad has ever happened in my premises, and I will continue to book people as I please, and you can piss off.
Who'd have thought that there was enough sand in Ireland to bury all of our heads?
I know. The beaches are full.
Even during COVID.
Yes. So, I suppose from my own point of view, I was told, I seen the hashtag I believe her a lot, and I don't know why, it only struck me this time that I believe her is not just for this current case. It's for any case where I know from my own point of view, female friends of mine, comics, have told me about, like warned me about working with people or doing certain gigs, and like it took me a lot longer than it should have to listen to them, just out of pure laziness, or I don't know, a willingness. I didn't want to.
You're a bad person, Kev.
It is, yeah.
You're a bad, selfish person trying to better your career.
Well, people had said to me, "Don't do this thing," and I didn't want to believe them because it was inconvenient for me, for my career, or it was just something I wanted to do. But because of libel laws in Ireland, you can't outright say, unless something's gone through a court case and a jury has found someone guilty, you can't really say anything about anybody openly. But women, out of a sort of grim necessity, tend to have networks where they discuss this sort of thing and keep track of behaviours. So if people are coming forward to you and saying something, there's more than likely good reason behind it, and you should listen.
Yeah, and I would say Daniel Sloss's special X is on HBO Max. I believe, I don't know if people in Ireland have access to that. I imagine so, because people, like, corporations love money, so I'm sure they'd take subscriptions from outside of America, or I'm sure there's other ways to find it. But that's a great special that deals with all of that.
Yes.
And might even have certain ties to Ireland that people might find that interesting.
Yes, I'd say probably in the next month that is going to be even more relevant than it is now. But well, what he talks about, and he has a very good point about, like, if you're a guy and your reaction to like a sexual assault scandal is, I wish I could find a rapist. I fucking wish I could find a rapist. I'd do his head in. It's disgusting. But instead of that sort of cowboy fantasy stuff, just take a look at what you're doing and take a look at what your mates are doing and talk to them. Like, I've seen a lot of that exact thing in the wake of the Davy Riley thing, where promoters have been like, I hope I meet Davy in an alley. I'll kick his noggin in. If he did that to my daughters, it's fucking disgusting. And then straight away followed up by, but of course, I'll still book anybody, and nothing wrong has ever happened in my shop.
Yeah, and I will not change any guidelines to how I run my club, because that's my club.
No, I'll still gig with anybody.
Hey, did you ever? Most men are bastards. Most men. I just like to say my club is actually take the hit, fellas.
Yeah. That's it. I think we'll just get off our high horse now. Off our Shetland ponies. That's it. Yeah. There's so many things that happened in the last month where it's like, fuck, right, we'll do an opening about that to get back to it. The, like, removal of statues, Black Lives Matter, you moving house, all these big events. I feel there's another one as well that I'm missing. My moped been knocked over and destroyed. Too soon, man. Yeah, I know. I don't want to talk about that yet. It's very raw. Yeah. But right. Let's tell a story about Irish history. Go back to the past where everything was grand. Yeah. Okay. All right. Story time. So you dream of Columbus every time that the panic starts. You dream of Columbus with your maps and your beautiful charts. You dream of Columbus with an ache in your traveling heart. So this episode was supposed to be about the 12th of July, which I don't know how much you know about the 12th of July, Jason. Protestant Christmas? Yeah, I mean, sure, yes. In theory, the celebration is for July the 12th, 1690, and the Battle of the Boyne. But when I was trying to start the story, I ended up going all the way back to 1477, just for context. I know how much you love context before these stories, so just to lay a little bit of background, some foundation. Yes, yeah, and also this was also inspired by events that were happening at the time in 2020. Right, here we go. Christopher Columbus visited Galway in 1477 while sailing from Bristol to Iceland. Did he fuck? He did indeed. Sorry, so apparently Galway was like a major trading port in the 1400s. Can I just tell you that I've always had the idea that in Washington there should be a bus company, a tour company called the Christopher Columbus. If only you come up with that idea 5 years ago when there was more palatable. You'd be swimming in it.
I know. And now I'd have to do like social distance, or you could do private helicopter tours. But Christopher Columbus, but helicopter. No, it's lost. It's just I can't even pun it out of it now.
I'm sorry for you, man. That's lost money on the table there. So right, Columbus visited Galway in 1477 while on his way from Bristol to Iceland, because apparently Galway was like a major trading port at the time. British ships would take fish from Iceland and then sell it to the Spanish and Portuguese in Galway, hence the Spanish Arch in Galway.
Ah.
Yeah.
And then because the British were there, that's where we get the culture of drinking a lot of cans in the sun.
It was the meeting point. That's where it all kicked off. I said like they traded with the Spanish and then hence the Spanish Arch, as if that actually explains why it's called the Spanish Arch. But I did enough of the legwork. Like it's mostly there.
Your sea leg work.
So when Columbus was there, he wrote a note in his book saying, "Men of Cathay, which is towards the Orient, have come hither. We have seen many remarkable things, especially in Galway, in Ireland. A man and a woman of most unusual appearance have come to land in 2 boats." Now, that's a spot-on Columbus impression, and I won't hear anything against it. But so he reckoned he'd seen 2 bodies in Galway that came from India, but there's probably Inuits or something.
What?
He's like 2. I don't know if it was when he was in Galway or it was just a story someone told him when he was in Galway. But he wrote a note in the book saying that like 2 bodies washed ashore in Galway that like came from another country. And since Galway is like the most westerly point of Europe, he reckoned it must have come from India.
Now, I'm not taking his word for it, seeing as when he got to America, he thought he was also in India.
Yeah.
So is it possible that the man's just obsessed with anything that comes from the sea, or he goes anywhere? It's like, this is India. No, Christopher, you're back in England. Bullshit, I am. This is India.
They could have been 2 bodies from Cork. I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know what. Like
a different land.
Yeah. It's obviously proof of a new world. But they're right. So there's also a popular legend that a Galway man called Guillermo Harris, aka William Harris, was on board with Columbus in 1492 when he sailed the ocean blue. And
if it rhymes, it must be true.
That's exactly right. So in the 1930s, a Chicago-based group of Irish Americans called the William Harris League went a step further than that and claimed that Harris had actually been to America before Columbus, and he was there showing Columbus the way. He was the one who brought him there.
You're telling me that there's possibly some rumors that might say that an Irishman with what name again?
Guillermo Harris.
Checks out.
Yeah.
Checks out with me. You're saying that he actually showed Christopher Columbus the way to America.
According to these guys, yeah.
No, not according to these guys, Kevin. That's what happened, right? History is written by the winners. Or if people just want to make stuff up and tell me, I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
the Irish discovered America. We built America. We populate 10% of America. Just call it Ireland.
Fair enough. I see you're already setting up your presidential platform for 2024.
It's my only hope of staying in the country.
Well, so pretty much what you did there is what these people in Chicago did in the 30s. They wanted to rename, I think it was a bridge or a street or something. They wanted to rename it after Harris. So it turned out that there was a William Harris from Galway that was on a list of people who had died in the Indies and whose families the Spanish Crown were going to compensate. But that was from 1511, 20 years after the fleet had sailed. So 20 years after...
you're saying there's a chance.
I'm saying 20 years after Columbus sailed to America, a guy who may have been from Galway was on the ship, and that was enough for people. They were like, America is basically New Ireland.
Little Ireland, yeah.
Ireland Junior. So I think it was a case of, like, I read a few pieces about this with all the statues being torn down at the minute, or at least at the time of this recording. Like, the Italian Americans tried to write themselves into the American story as a way to combat racism, because, like, at the time, in the early 1900s in America, the Italians were, like, bottom rung, and they were getting a lot of shit. So they were like, well, Columbus fucking discovered your country, so how about a bit of respect? But they kind of made this sanitized version of Columbus to sell it to Americans. Because even, like, when Columbus was alive...
Because he's an awful bastard.
Oh, yeah, he was arrested for tyranny when he was alive. And if you're arrested for tyranny in the 16th century, like, you must
really
be
bad.
nuts.
you're bad at covering it up.
Yeah.
It's like,
I don't
you
even
can
think
just
they have
go-
to cover it up too much.
at that stage, if the authorities asked even the slaves, just go, hey, is that guy mistreating you? You just shoot them a look, and you're like, no, he's great, he's fine. Don't say anything about old Christopher. That's
He's dead.
it is odd. It is odd about how whatever country you're from, they will just whitewash everything.
But well, yeah, that's a good point about his covering up skills, because he was literally like the only line. Like, if he had just killed everybody and sailed back and was like, oh, I don't know what to tell you, I'm a hero. I suppose he would have needed a crew to sail back. But yeah, it's not as if they could check up on him. Like, he was arrested by the equivalent of the Spanish government for tyranny, and he was removed as governor of the Indies. But the only evidence they had against him was like his own crew, so he must have been pretty fucked up.
Yeah, especially oh god. So like after he returned, so like he's basically told everyone, "Hey, just say nothing.
Yeah,
Don't rat me out here. I've spared all your lives. Everyone's good. We're going to it's going to be fine. We're all going to be heroes here." And then they get back and they go, "Do you know what? That guy's fucking evil."
We've discovered the new world, all right? If we all just keep wished, this is payday for all of us. We are set for life. And the second they got into port, he was like, that man is a monster. We need to get him out of here.
Yeah. And he didn't even know how to get here if it wasn't for that Irish guy.
No, if Guillermo really, he was he was the real captain.
Maybe it's a case of he met Guillermo like 21 years previous in Galway when he was doing those trips from Iceland and Bristol and such, and then maybe they shared a night together in an inn drinking some whiskey, poaching pints, who knows, Kevin. And then Guillermo leans into him and says, "Christopher, there's this place called India. Just go west. Just keep going.
Go west, my friend. Go west."
Yeah. And then he says, it's kind of like, he's like, but no, he says, don't even go. Maybe that's the case. Maybe he goes, there's this place I'm going to go to, because that's how they screw you. They never tell you about where the new places are. I found the new place. I'm going to go over there. It's kind of like when Paul McCartney told Michael Jackson, you need to buy and own all of your own music, or else the record labels will screw you. So then Jackson turns around and says, I'm going to buy all of your music. And then that's what Christopher Columbus has done to our boy here now, Guillermo.
Sure, yeah.
He's Jacksoned him.
He's Jacksoned him.
And I don't know whether it's going to be the only comparison I make to Christopher Columbus and Michael Jackson in this episode, but I can tell you, phenomenal dancer.
Christopher Columbus.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you can easily imagine how this like rumor started. Like, I wouldn't put it past any Galway man especially after Columbus was dead, to just be like, Christopher, I fucking met him all right. Sure, didn't I show him the way? Sure, I rode him over myself, basically. So
this is like the 15th century equivalent of the former like local GAA star at the bar.
Yeah.
Like, just 20 years later. Good, you should have seen me back in my day. I went out there in a boat with Christopher Columbus that day, and oh God, tell you what, there wasn't a man on the light that day, just one day, and maybe not every day, but that day it was me, and I was the man. And Christopher looked at me and he said, "Do you know what? Fair play to you. If you had the commitment, you'd do anything, Johnny." But he was a whore for the pints.
I'll say it now. I'll admit it. I couldn't keep away from the drink. I couldn't. Many a man said it to me. If I could keep myself dry, I would have made America. I would have fucking made it.
I would have been the world's #1 pool player if it wasn't for the beer.
Yeah. But so the first time the name America shows up on a map is 1507, and they named it after Amerigo Vespucci, who was the guy who figured out that America was a new continent and not just another part of India, like Columbus thought.
You know, when he was traveling about there, did they call it the merry-go-round?
Yeah, exactly. That's what they used to call doing a trip of America, the merry-go-round. But Columbo died in 1506, so like a year before this happened. So they named it America a year after Columbus died. No matter how much, like when someone dies, no matter how much bad they've done, people are kind of like, no, he was a good man. Like, don't speak ill of the dead. If the year after you died,
like Savile and Jackson.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta at least give them a couple of months before you out them as pedophiles.
Epstein.
Yeah. But no matter how much of a dickhead you were, if the year after you died, they named your biggest achievement after some other guy, they really must not have liked you.
That's fair. Yeah, you don't even get that grace period. That
No, I mean, like, yeah, I feel like people would have just out of politeness called it. You could be currently living in Colombo Town.
Texas or just America.
Just America in general.
I wouldn't call it a town. That's like, it's a far bigger version of what I would refer to. I was living in Dublin, referred as hidden to town. And like, this is not. I would say the same about my village of 1,000 people. I'm just like,
Sure.
if I'm going down the street anywhere, it's going to town.
But therefore, if you hadn't been such a dick, you'd be living in Columbus, the country, or Columbia.
I'd be up with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So this starting tangent came up because apparently Genoa gave Galway a statue for Columbus in 1992.
Tear it down.
Yeah, it was
Tear it down.
It was vandalized there recently, and when I saw it in the news, I was confused as to why there was a statue for Columbus in Galway in the first place. But in fairness, it's not like a statue of him; it's a statue of a ship. That's sort of, it's one of those classic Irish esoteric statues that doesn't. It could mean anything. It's like a new age representation of a ship.
Where is it?
It's in Galway.
Oh,
it's by the Spanish
Do you mean
Arch.
it's about 7 different pieces of metal just welded together by some lad who was on mushrooms?
Yeah, pretty much. It's pretty much it's a stone wavy shape thing. Someone managed to spray paint BL on the side of it, presumably to
He
finish
stopped
off with,
short before the M.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe they were going to say like bloody Columbus. At it again. I don't know what they were trying to. No one. We'll never know what they were trying to do. But it was in the news there on RTE for vandalism recently. But this story is not about Columbus. This story, I'm sure you know from your history from the junior cert, that Columbus was sent on his merry trip in 1492 by Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, whose combined kingdoms roughly make up Spain.
Do you mean Ferdinand Aragon, the rightful heir of Gondor?
Yeah, I knew you'd enjoy this. Apparently, yeah, Aragon was a kingdom in like what is now Spain. So in 1492, they eventually agreed to fund Columbus's voyage to India. They were reluctant to give him any money to go, not because they thought the earth was flat, but because all the experts at the time told them that Columbus was wrong and India was much further away than he thought, which, in fairness, they were right.
They were, yeah, that's very true.
And I think I might have said this before, but for some reason, the principal of my secondary school, his token punishment for everything was to write out 4 pages on Columbus. So that intro was just for him. I'm sure he's probably a big fan. I can't imagine why he wouldn't be. So this is the start of the actual story at 39 minutes. So we'll count it from here.
Part 1, intro.
Part 1. Here we go. So Ferdinand and Isabella had a daughter called Catherine of Aragon. And in 1501, at the age of 15, she was married to Arthur, Prince of Wales. But he died 5 months later from a sweating sickness, which it was some sort of sickness they both got. You sweat a lot. And then she recovered and he died.
B.O.
Yeah, I don't know. It does seem like maybe they were put to bed because they had too much BO.
And then someone shot him in the chest. And it was, it's complications relating to BO.
So she hung around court for years. She became an ambassador for the Aragonese in 1507, making her the first female ambassador in European history.
Nice.
Yeah, there you go. So because of alliances and the king didn't want to repay the dowry for her, she eventually married Arthur's younger brother Henry in 1509. So because he didn't want to pay the money back, she just had to hang around there for like 7 years, and then eventually he was like, all right, you can just marry my other son. But in order to marry his second son, they required a special dispensation from the Pope because, as you know, according to Leviticus, you can't marry your brother's widow.
Because what's the classic rhyme they teach in school about that? Widow, wid no.
Yeah, it's a good mnemonic. Now, in research for this, I went through and Leviticus is the book that brought us such great bans as like you can't eat pork, can't have tattoos, no gay sex, no mullets. I don't know what. There's nothing else left here. Like, what's the point? There's no shrimp.
That's gone. So no. Our bacon fries. No, that's scampi fries. We can still have scampi fries.
You can't even eat snake.
Is there a point in living, Kevin, if you can't have
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, and a lot of it's don't touch carcasses, which is good advice at any stage.
So they're vegans.
No, you can eat cow. Eat as much cow as you want. But just
That's
don't
grand.
touch dead cow.
I'll just have a heart attack at 40. It's fine.
Yeah.
That's probably the average life cycle back then anyway. So,
but they're also big into don't fuck anyone. Well, like, I mean, there's the classics, don't fuck your relatives, which makes sense. But then there's also a lot of stuff like don't fuck your dead brother's wife, and don't fuck your uncle's wife. Don't sleep with a mother and her daughter. At that stage, I think it's just getting a bit preachy. But
yeah. Well, I also think that maybe it's one of those notes as you could probably edit that down to just say don't have sex with anyone that's in any way related to you by blood or by marriage.
Yes, yeah. A lot of it just seems to be these are good guidelines. If you live in a small community, don't do these things. But Henry was a big proponent of Leviticus anyway, so you can't marry your brother's widow. But there's also another bit in Leviticus that says a marriage isn't official until it's consummated. So she testified in front of the Pope that she was still a virgin.
No way.
Yeah, so but they were married for what did I say? 5 months, I think. Yeah.
And she was pretty young though.
She was young, so she was 15. And I know like that is she's 15, she's a young girl, but it's also like 1501 standards. I don't know. I mean, she said in front of the Pope that she was still a virgin, and that's no easy feat. So maybe
she was. Maybe he was like a super nice woke dude who would use the fact that he was being nice to that person in public to maybe infiltrate the lives of some other girls who would be more likely to. I don't know where I'm getting that idea.
He was a member of the British royal family, so we can only assume that he would have respected a teenage girl's wishes. They lived together for those 5 months, like, so I don't know. Anyway, but
a possible marriage of convenience.
Well, yeah, they're all kind of marriages of convenience because they're all just like the whole point of these marriages was just to make alliances between Spain and England. But the only way to like solidify that is to have a child. So,
all right. But I was going to say, do you think he might have been gay?
We'll get into that later on. Although I feel like that's just the fan theory for everybody. You know what I mean?
Like it's a pretty easy fan theory to jump to. People get married. It's 5 months into it, and she got like after 2 weeks, she's like, "How about tonight?" He's like, "No, I'm just really tired. I have to go. Do you know what? I actually have to go muck out the stables with the stable boy Pedro."
Yeah, again.
How much can that one horse be shitting? A lot. It's every day. It's constant. Me and Pedro and Guillermo and Santa Cruz have to every single night. Why do you think you hear those sounds? It's a very strenuous job.
So Henry presumably takes all this stuff pretty seriously. He's a devout Catholic. In 1521, Pope Leo X anoints Henry as defender of the faith for his role in opposing Protestant Reformation. So he's a good Catholic man who takes this stuff seriously. But Catherine swears in front of God and the Pope that she's still a virgin, so the Pope annuls the old marriage, and Catherine and Henry get married.
Ah, so they get away with it.
Catherine and Henry get married in 1509. She's 23 and he's 18. So, grand. The two of them then have trouble conceiving. Most of their children died in childbirth, except for one who survives, Mary, a woman. So that's not good. That's almost as bad as having no children, I think, for Henry. He's not happy. By 1525, he becomes infatuated with Anne Boleyn, who is one of Catherine's ladies in waiting.
Jesus.
Henry thinks that his marriage is cursed because he fucked his dead brother's wife, which he suddenly cares about 16 years later. I don't know. But it seems that
it might just be one of those midlife crisis things where you start to look back at the rest of your life. You just go like, oh, well, what are the shitty things I've done over the years that I could make a bit? Oh, do you know what? I've already gone down a dark path.
Well, it seems like Henry had a lot of mistresses, but Anne didn't want to become his mistress. So at that point, he was like, I need to fuck this woman. So he does what all good men in this situation do. He starts reading the Bible. And because the Bible is so vague and so full of stuff, he comes to the conclusion that the Pope had no power to absolve Catherine's first marriage. And that
let he without sin cast the first stone. I can cheat on my wife.
Well, not only he comes to the conclusion that the Pope had no right to dissolve Catherine's first marriage, and that he was now cursed by God. So, in 1527, he sends his secretary William Knight to Rome to deliver a message to the new Pope, Clement VII, to ask for an annulment of his marriage. But Clem isn't going for it. Partially because it would mean he had to rule against his predecessor, which I guess is a bit of a faux pas in Pope circles. But also because at the time he was being held prisoner by the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. So Clement sided with King Francis of France against Charles V because he thought France was getting too big for its boots. But then that backfired when Charles defeated France in Italy. And Charlie Boy didn't pay his troops properly. So in May 1527, they had like a mini mutiny, and they all went down to Rome to loot the place in order to get themselves paid. So the Holy Roman Army sacked Rome.
That's a lot to unpack there at once.
Well, I'll get to the end of this paragraph and then we can unpack it all. But I went deep into the weeds in this. It's Game of Thrones stuff.
It's really good up until the end, and then you bollocks the finish.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So the Holy Roman Army sacks Rome in order to get paid, and they forced Pope Clementine to take refuge until a ransom is paid. It's at that time that Henry's secretary William Knight comes up asking Clementine for an annulment of Henry's marriage. But
let me guess, so he does this time?
No, he doesn't, because Catherine is Charles V's aunt. So Charles V is Catherine's nephew.
Oh.
So he's a bit... It's just one of those cases of perfect timing where he comes over, he's like, man, my boss wants to fuck a new woman, so I just need you to annul his marriage. And Clem's like, yeah, sure, whatever, what's the name? Henry V and Catherine of Aragon. And then there's a record scratch moment where Clementine looks out the window of his jail cell to see Charles V shaking his head with his arms crossed.
And then the phrase, "Don't shoot the messenger," was born.
So there's a lot going on there, but Clem says no. Henry VIII is not happy. He gets his archbishop on the case, arguing for an annulment, but when he fails, Henry charges him with primure, which is the crime of siding with anyone outside of Britain against the monarchy who disagrees with the monarchy.
I don't think they've ever changed that rule.
No, I don't. I think that's still... I think you could still be accused of primure in the Sun these days.
It would be a 15-word headline instead of a 1-word succinct part. That's he's been accused of siding with people outside of England, saying that England's not as cool as England should be. The bastards.
But so when the Archbishop of Canterbury dies in 1532, Anne Boleyn gets her stooge Thomas Cranmer into the position. So now they've got a man on the inside. And Anne and Henry get married in secret in January of 1533. And on the 23rd of May, Cranmer announces that Catherine's marriage to Henry is against the will of God and threatens to excommunicate them all unless they separate, that's 4 months after he's already gotten married to this new woman.
Excommunicate. That's what my girlfriends do when they break up with me. They won't talk to me anymore.
No, it's tragic.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah, but I don't really understand. So they put Cranmer in position so that he can help them out, and then they just go ahead and get married anyway, and then wait 4 months until he denounces Henry's first marriage and asks. He puts on a big show and he's like, "You need to get annulled or I'll excommunicate you." So Henry reluctantly divorces his first wife, even though he's been married to someone else for 4 months. So, understandably, Pope Clementine is pissed off, but the rest of the monarchs of Europe don't want him to do anything to make England separate, so he just holds his tongue. And Anne and Henry's daughter Elizabeth was born in September of that year, so it's cutting it pretty fine. I mean, they got married in January. In September, they have a child.
They got pregnant straight away.
Yeah, but also they only got married in May in the eyes of the public. So I don't really know how they got away with any of this or why they bothered. They seem to go to a lot of lengths to make everything official, but then at the same time they were just raw fucking in the background.
But it's everyone was raw fucking at the time, Kev.
But why go to so much trouble to make it seem official and get the Pope's blessing if you're just gonna 4 months later, 4 months after the wedding, they have a child?
Because do nobles produce quicker?
I think
Do their spawn come out after maybe 4 or 5 months? Is that what happens?
I assume that's what they went with.
Plebs like us push them out after like 9, but it's different rules for these posh boys.
Yeah, I assume they pulled some sort of, it's a miracle birth. It came after only 4 months.
Oh, look, it's premature. Why is it already 11 pounds? We're bigger in our country.
That child is 5 years old. It's truly a sign from God.
He's destined to be a footballer.
Yeah. But, so Henry starts putting things in place to separate from the Catholic Church. And he puts a couple of new reformists into key positions, including his new chief minister, Thomas Cromwell. That's a name.
That sounds like a nice name.
Yeah, he's our
is
Cromwell's great.
Is he a stand-up citizen?
He is. He's a solid dude with a good lineage. But in 1533, they declare Henry's only child with Catherine, Mary, is illegitimate, and that his child with Anne is the next successor. And in 1534, they passed the Act of Supremacy, which recognises the king's status as the head of the church in England, whereas previously it was the Pope. So now they're saying the king is the top of the church, and he's got the direct line, or the monarch is the top of the church, and they've got the direct line to God. So it's at that stage that Clementine has had enough, and he excommunicates Henry and Cranmer. So now the Church of England is born.
Okay. It's a ballsy move. You're like, there's one man who can talk to God. They're like, no, I'm taking that power from him. Well, it's technically the power has been bestowed upon him supposedly by God or by the no, I'm taking that now. It's mine. I want it. It's mine. So how are you, God? Is it okay if I can't? He says it's fine, lads. He says it's fine. He says no. He says he has to go. You can't talk to him. He's got to go. He's got to go into a meeting. He's like, can we just talk to him for a second? No. He's really got to go. He's got to go. He's got to go pick up his kids. Sorry. Click. Bye. Beep. Beep. Bye. God. Bye. He says, guys,
it is pretty
worry.
foolproof because even in
Kill
your
the bitch. Line them up. Get me a son. Give me Anne Boleyn and 15 others.
Well, I don't know what you know about the history of Henry VIII, but that is pretty much exactly what happened. But, no, it's pretty foolproof because no one can argue with him. If the Pope says he's the one who talks to God, Henry's like, now I talk to God. No one else is like, I also talk to God, and he says, no one else is allowed to do that. No one's allowed to argue with him, or else it's blasphemous.
Yeah, it's a genius idea.
Yeah,
as long as there's no system in place that has to deal with logic and reason.
No. So this is the origins of the Church of England. This is how Britain becomes a Protestant country. Mostly because Henry wanted to fuck Anne Boleyn and couldn't get a divorce from his wife.
Yeah.
Now,
this isn't not news to me, Kev. It's not. I've heard this.
Have I not told you anything new?
No, you have. There's been lots, but I know about that kind of general idea.
I kind of knew generally that's how it started, but I wanted to fill in some of the details of it. I didn't go into the rest of Henry's life because it's not relevant and this is long enough already. But he goes on to have several wives. I think he kills Anne Boleyn shortly after this and then just starts. He doesn't bother with the whole song and dance of the first divorce. The whole woo the Pope, put people in place, subtle machinations. He just starts killing them after this. But
yeah, it worked for the first time. So basically, when the first time it was like, no, it's grand. I was just talking to God. He says it's fine. And then 10 minutes into that marriage, he's like, bad call. You know what I could do is what was that? Oh, 1 second, guys. I gotta step out of the room for a second. Just getting this phone's buzzing. Who is it? Lord and Savior.
The
How are you?
G-Man.
It's you're telling me I've made a terrible choice. Right, everyone. Get rid of her. And where's the next 4? Are they ready to be picked and chosen at will? Okay, fantastic.
It's when you've gone so big so quickly. When your first divorce, you're like, separate from the church. I talk to God now. I'm the supreme power. Where do you go from that? It's too big too quickly. When you need to divorce the second wife, what have you got? There's nothing left in the chamber.
No, I think but at that stage you'd start just for roaming rates, for Roman Catholic rates. You'd start to build in the caveat of the next murder. God said I can marry this one, And if that doesn't work out, I've got a 30-day money-back guarantee where I can guillotine her and get the next one straight in. So just so we all know, that's part of the rules now.
It's in there.
And if any of you priests have any problems with it, you can have sex now.
I have that. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. What a card to play. We've just decided Henry's the greatest. We love him.
Henry VIII.
So in 1542, Henry is declared King of Ireland, and it was brought under direct rule after his cousin Silken Thomas Fitzgerald tried to stage an Irish rebellion.
Oh,
which
great name. One of my favourite names in Irish history.
I think we'll go into that one again in a different episode, but basically I think he was Henry's cousin, and there was some misunderstanding, and he tried to cause a rebellion. So before this, the monarch of England was the title of the Lord of Ireland, but after this rebellion, it gets brought into like one. So now, from now on, the monarch is now also the King or Queen of Ireland. So that's Henry VIII is the first British monarch who rules over Ireland directly.
Huh.
Yeah. So that's the start of British Protestantism. The next few monarchs seem to flip back and forth between being Catholic and Protestant, but generally it trends towards Protestantism. And over the next 100 years, the British have this paranoia that the Pope will come back for revenge and exercise rule over England, which, Spain is Catholic, France is Catholic, there's the aforementioned Holy Roman Empire. Like, a lot of Europe is Catholic at the time, and Henry did fuck around a lot and was married 6 times, so there's a lot of offspring.
Oh, did he fuck around a lot, Kevin?
Oh, he did.
Was he just married a lot in loving relationships?
No, both. He was married a lot and then also
fair.
fucked around a lot.
That's fair.
He had a lot of offsprings, some legit, some not. Some of them were Catholic and some of them weren't. So any time for generations afterwards, there was always someone to rally around, depending on like what you wanted. So the English were afraid that someone would rally around a Catholic monarch and the Pope would use that to take over the country. Which they didn't pick the idea up off the floor either. Like, there was several mini Catholic rebellions in England. The most notable one, I guess, was in 1605 when Guy Fawkes and some other Catholics were found guilty of the gunpowder plot, where they tried to blow up the government buildings, and they would have killed James I and the entire Parliament. So this is where the tradition of burning effigies of Guy Fawkes on the 5th of November starts for Guy Fawkes Night, a popular British pastime.
Famously married to Lady Fox.
Jimi Hendrix wrote a song about her. So that's like the big Catholic plot to destroy the government. In the late 40s and 50s, our old friend Oliver Cromwell fucks things up during the English Civil War. And
he fucks things up?
He fucks it up. He fucks it up royally. We'll go into Cromwell's stuff in a different episode because he deserves his own episode. He's a bastard of such magnitude that we can't sandwich him into this one. But
I think that's fair.
Basically, him and the parliamentarians are against Charles I of House Stuart and the Royalists. So one of the factors for the Civil War is the fact that Charles I married a French Catholic princess in 1625. They're not happy with that. He was also accused of trying to reintroduce Catholicism when he appointed Archbishop Laud and started messing with the mass format. So in response to people's complaints, Laud cut off 3 gentlemen's ears, which apparently, when I read that, it said it was uncommon for gentlemen. So apparently it was just, that's fine if he was just cutting peasants' ears off, but because he did it to someone with a bit of a title, that was unusual.
So he was cutting people's ears off?
Yeah.
Oh, lordy.
Rumour has it he'd take the severed ears and then shout into it, mimicking, just loading it over them, just having a real fun time with it. So the outcome of that is that Charles I is executed, the first British monarch to be executed. His sons Charles II and James go into exile in France, and they come back after the Civil War, and Charles II is made king in 1660, and then almost immediately repeats the mistakes of his father and marries Catherine of Portugal, a Catholic.
Oh.
Yeah.
I've been saying it, as an Irishman, I've been saying it for years, lads. Well, actually, usually I've just been saying don't marry Irish women, but we can extend it now to just don't marry Catholics. Just it's not worth it. The guilt, the long running inbuilt guilt It's not. It's not worth it.
But I feel,
and then plus the children, the amount of children you're expected to have.
in terms of optics, though, like none of these marriages were done for love. They were all done for power and unions. Given what happened, his father.
What about the love of power again?
Yeah, this is the true magic of marriage. So Charles II is in charge. He's married a Catholic. 5 years after he gets into power, the Great Plague hits London. The bubonic plague kills tens of thousands of people. And then 1 year after that, the Great Fire of London happens, which was blamed on the Catholics. They built a monument to the fire in 1681, and it read, "Burning of this Protestant city, begun and carried out by the treachery and malice of the Popish faction." So that was written on the monument to the fire, and that bit of text was only removed from the monument in 1830. So some 150 odd years later. So basically he's got like 2 years. He's married to a Catholic. He gets 2 years during which thousands of people die in a plague, and then the whole city burns down. So now you've got all these refugees fleeing London into the countryside, telling tales of Catholic demons burning and plaguing. It's not a good time for old Charles. In 1672, he announces the Royal Declaration of Indulgence, which suspends the penal laws. I don't know what you know about the penal laws, but they were basically laws against anyone who wasn't Church of England. They showed up in a lot of different forms over like the space of 300 years. But in the year 1672, it basically meant you got fined for not going to Church of England Mass. You couldn't congregate in groups of people over 5 if you weren't Church of England. And if you're a nonconformist priest, you couldn't come within 5 miles of any town.
Of any town?
Of any town in England. Or, well, sorry,
that's
in
ridiculous.
the 3 kingdoms.
That's crazy, Kev. They're treating priests like sex offenders.
Only Catholic priests, and ironically, they were probably treating sex offenders pretty fine at the time. So, those were the laws as they stand. So, in 1672, Charles II gets rid of those laws, which the people, they don't like that. By 1673, a year later, Parliament convinced them to put in place the first of the Test Acts, which meant you had to take Anglican communion and deny transubstantiation if you wanted any government job, if you wanted to be in the military, or if you wanted to go to university. So, do you know the differences between Catholicism and Protestantism?
Do I know the difference between good and evil? There's a lot less kneeling in Protestantism.
The only difference is, I think, they don't believe the Virgin Mary was born without sin, and they don't believe that when you take communion, Catholics believe it literally transforms into the body of Christ, in a literal sense, and that's called transubstantiation. And I think those are the only two differences.
There has to be something else in there.
I genuinely think there's like two very, because transubstantiation it's a pretty far out idea.
Yeah, but also at the time when they were making it, they were like, "Well, how are you going to change and make your own religion? How are you going to improve on this? Good luck finding a hole in this, a chink in this armor." And what about this part where you say that this piece of food literally turns into your deity? Shite, lads. We were meant to make it explicitly clear that this thing was metaphorical. Who put in the foreword that says believe every single part of this scripture word for word?
It is a cornerstone of what we believe.
No, they're not just stories for which you to glean your own ideas. These are core tenets of our belief system.
So basically, Charles eases some laws, which makes it better for people who aren't Church of England for about a year. And then the Parliament says, fuck that, put them back in place, and also make this new law that says if you want any job in the government, to be involved with the military, or to get a university degree, you have to take Anglican communion and denounce the tenets of Catholicism. But, in a shock twist, when his brother James refused to take Anglican Mass in order to keep his position as the Lord High Admiral, he was outed as a Catholic.
Oh.
So James and his first wife had been exposed to Catholic ideas while they were in exile in France and Spain, in part after meeting with the Irish Bishop of Dublin, Peter Talbot, and his brother Richard. The Talbots...
Famous for the street.
Actually, no. I thought so as well, and I looked into it. It turns out it was a very popular name. Or no, I think they were just like a very popular family.
It's kind of like Devereux in Wexford.
Yes.
Or Brennan's in Carlow.
Oh, best name you can have.
And Kilkenny, to be fair.
Yeah.
We didn't travel too far.
No. Once you had the bread, that was your, that was it.
Well, it's a staple.
Yes.
Part of an economy and a diet.
Yeah. I cut some bread this morning, actually, a sourdough loaf, and let me tell you, I get it. The sliced bread, I get the appeal. Cutting it yourself is a pain in the arse.
Because what was the best thing before sliced bread?
Just bread, probably.
Yeah.
It's the best thing since bread.
Yeah, well, it was a great time to be alive when every invention for at least a small time became the best thing ever.
Yeah, sure.
It was like the first 2 years of podcasts.
Yeah. Everyone was a revelation. And now you just get 17 people doing the same derivative concept, stealing off Finodor.
Yeah.
But no, I looked into that. It's not that same Talbot, but none of the Talbots in this story have anything to do with Talbot Street.
Okay.
Home of, for anyone outside of Ireland, Talbot Street is, what would you call it? Like home of heroin in Dublin?
No, it's not. Abbey Street used to be a part of that. There's a lot of places, Kevin.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into. We could do a power ranking top 5 shite talk heroin streets of Dublin.
I saw I was in the car yesterday and I saw someone buying heroin wearing a mask, like a COVID mask, which is it's such a weird line to draw your health concerns at.
Fair.
So the Talbots were an old Norman family that were part of the Catholic gentry. Their father, William Talbot, had been a prominent lawyer in Dublin around the early 1600s, and he was appointed Chief Magistrate of Dublin. But then, because he was Catholic, he was removed from the office after being accused of recusory, which is not attending Anglican Mass. So, this is what you were talking about earlier on, but in good Catholic fashion, William and his wife had 16 children.
Oh.
Yeah, that's... and I just realised as I said that sentence, I don't know his wife's name, and that's... I say William and his wife. She had 16 children, and I didn't even put her name into this. That's on me. That's my bad.
16 kids. Did they not have a TV, Kevin?
No, they unfortunately not. They couldn't afford one. So after Cromwell took over Ireland, a lot of the Talbots went into exile and attached their fates to Charles II and his younger brother James. William's oldest son, Robert Talbot, became one of Charles's closest advisors in exile. He died in 1670. But then another son, Richard, also known as Fighting Dick Talbot or Lying Talbot, which I don't know when like switching Richard to Dick became a thing, but this is like the second guy who's... It seemed to be quite popular back then. And again, I don't know if they...
Humanity Dick.
Yeah, Humanity Dick, yes.
Lying Dick sounds like he's got some ex-girlfriends that weren't too happy about a certain...
Like, I feel like that, like this, one of these stories could be the origin of Dick to Richard, because they were just like, he's a lying dick. And then Richard had to be like, it's a nickname for Richard. Don't listen to her. She's crazy. It's just a classic joke we have between the two of us. So old Dick Talbot, at the age of 19, Dick had already escaped certain death at the Battle of Dungan's Hill, and he'd managed to survive Cromwell's siege of Drogheda. He lay wounded in a pile of bodies in Drogheda for about 3 days, and then he escaped the country wearing women's clothing and went to Europe and met up with James and Charles there.
Fantastic.
This really seems to be a theme where like people would just wear women's clothing and therefore were invisible to society.
This is like the first season of The Walking Dead, where Rick Grimes decides to cover himself. He smothers himself in like zombie guts, so then they can't smell his human flesh, and he's able to walk amongst the zombies.
Yeah,
I'm not saying. No, I am. Am I calling Catholics zombies?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, I've said it now, so I have to stick with it.
So Dick joined the French military when he was in exile. He rose up through the ranks to the rank of colonel, and he kept himself occupied, like a lot of other exiled gentry, by plotting to kill Cromwell. During one attempt in 1655, he was caught and interrogated by Cromwell himself, and he either escaped by getting the guards drunk and shimmering out the window, or else he just bribed Cromwell. I feel like he liked to tell the first story, but the second story seemed to be more plausible. Yeah.
I don't know. We've gone through a couple of different stories where people have escaped just because they've gotten the person in charge of them drunk.
Well,
Like it's.
uh,
I'll tell you a story
Okay.
of a place back home. I heard of a man there, and the first night at the bar was reopened, that the owner, the publican, had to be woken up at the end of the night because he was horizontally laid across asleep on the counter of the bar, and his patrons had to wake him up so he could close the bar because they wanted to leave. COVID was a tough time, and I think you should be given one night of leeway. Your first night back out, I think everyone should be just given, sorry about that. It won't happen again.
You know yourself, I haven't had a drink in 3 months. I forgot how to be a human.
Yeah.
That.
Is this not my bed? I'm sorry.
So, well, I thought you were going to talk about this man that's going to come up now in about 2 sentences, but so when Charles II got back on the throne, Dick Talbot returned to Ireland and acted as an agent for Roman Catholic families, arguing against the Act of Settlement and Explanation that Cromwell had put in. And his zeal when he was arguing with these things brought him into direct confrontation with James Butler, the Duke of Ormond, who that was the guy that Thomas Blood kept trying to kidnap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back in Thomas Blood, from the Irish crown. No, sure, the English crown jewels.
Yeah.
The right. This is, and so he's a bastard now, because there's nothing you can tell me in this story now that's going to change my opinion, because I've laid it down. Blood is thicker than water here, Kev. I'm on my boy Thomas's side.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. I think Talbot used to get into arguments with Butler, and it ended up getting thrown into the Tower of London at least twice, apparently in 1661 and 1671. And after the 1671 incident, the English Commons put forward a motion to have Talbot banned from all public employment. Well, so this is the same James Butler you told us about in that other story. So Butler was also part of the Catholic gentry who'd also joined the Stuart family in exile in France. But one fact I found out about him that you'd left out. At the age of 19, Butler met his 14-year-old cousin for the first time and fell in love with her. But she was the king's ward and promised to another, so Butler had to bribe the king 15,000 so that he could marry his cousin.
Well, I don't know if I left that out, or to be honest, I didn't research him all too much. I was more talking about Blood. That was don't call me out. Don't call me out on what we've done 3 seasons ago in our first season, our debut season, when both of us recorded off of one microphone, hunched over a window ledge in Smithfield with a curtain over us to dampen the sound. I think I did pretty well with that episode.
You did. No, and in fairness, I read about Butler. Doesn't really come into the story too much, but I read about him for ages and wrote a lot about him.
Oh, so you only brought him up to?
No, he's important, but he's not in it that much. But he's
important in the sense as he's a vehicle for you to dismantle my previous episodes.
He's important in the same way that a knife is important when you're stabbing your co-worker in the back. But I read about him for ages before I realized it was the same guy, and I think I wish I had have been recording my face when I was like, I just read about some bit eventually where he was like kept getting accosted by a fellow called Colonel Blood. I was like, that's the guy. I've learned something.
2 and 2. Wait, hold on. Give me a second.
3 hours of me with a whiteboard and a marker and an abacus. But so he was a fine man, there he is. He meets his cousin for the first time. He decides he wants to bang her and nobody else, and he pays 15,000 for the privilege of fucking his 14-year-old cousin.
Okay. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire.
If you want to find more about Butler, you can go back and listen to the Colonel Thomas Blood episode.
Did you get that reference?
Oh, what was Jerry
Lee Lewis. Yeah, Jerry Lee Lewis.
Jerry Lewis. Well,
he wrote his underage cousin.
Cool.
Niece or nephew or whatever.
I watched Mike Judd's animated.
The new one.
Yeah, or no, I think because Jerry Lee Lewis is one of the ones he covers in the country season. Is there a new season?
Oh no, I haven't seen. No, I just mean the new show. Like, I haven't seen it.
Oh, okay.
Is it 2 years old now or something?
Sure, yeah, maybe it's 2 years old. So the first season is Country Music Stars. I think he covers Jeffrey Lewis, and then the second season is Funk Stars.
Oh, interesting. But I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's very good. But well, as you can see from paying 15,000 to fuck his 14-year-old cousin, Butler was a fine, upstanding.
That's
citizen.
over 1,000 per year.
That is 1,000 for each year and then 1 for good luck. But Butler was a upstanding citizen, And during the Cromwellian years, Charles I had made him Lord Lieutenant of Ireland. So he'd fled Ireland in 1650 and joined Charles II and James in exile. So that's how he'd
Where's that?
a place north of France somewhere. I don't know if you've looked at like a European map of the 1600s, but it's pretty difficult to figure out what the fuck's going on. But there was a third Talbot son called Peter Talbot. He was a priest, and he was also attached to King Charles in exile. He was appointed Archbishop of Dublin in January of 1669 after Charles II got back on the throne. In August, he held his first synod, opening it with high mass, which hadn't been done in 40 years. Peter was...
Because usually the church were pretty against marijuana,
Yeah.
but they made an exception. Guys, people are still really into this Catholicism thing. We're going to have to change something. It's not enough to let the priests fuck anymore. We need to get people blazed.
It's not well reported, but the first use of incense was actually just used to cover up the smoke of that stink ganj that was reefing out the cathedrals.
Holy roly.
Peter Talbot was also a factor in the Test Acts being brought in, because he gathered up the Catholic gentry and sent an ambassador to London to ask Charles to ease up on the Catholics, take it easy on the old boys, since with their friends and all. But that spooked the Protestant gentry, and as a result, Peter had to go back into exile for safety. He spent most of his time in exile in Paris. Until 1675, he was in poor health. He asked his old friend Charles to be allowed to return to England, and then 2 years later, he asked to be allowed to return to Ireland to die in his own country. And his old friend James helped him out. But but he didn't help him out when he was thrown into exile the first time. Basically just for asking, can we please ease up the laws that means being a Catholic doesn't allow you to do anything. But back in 1673, Charles opposes his brother's conversion, at least in public. But he allows James to marry...
He just keeps tapping B a lot.
Okay. Yes. So on paper, Charles was opposed to James's conversion to Catholicism, but he allowed James to marry the Italian princess Mary of Modena. She was 15 and James was 40.
He has previous.
He has. They're both Catholics, so it's grand. But Charles did order that James's daughters from his first marriage be brought up Church of England. So his daughters Mary and Anne are raised Church of England. And in order to seal the deal, in 1677, James reluctantly agrees to marry his daughter Mary to William, Prince of Orange, the Protestant stadtholder of the Dutch Republic. William is also James's nephew. So I guess that makes... Mary and William are cousins?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it seems like it's more of the done thing at the time. Or even maybe nowadays. I don't know how the royal family is going, but I think this was like the second time ever they've married outside of... for me, the second time ever they've married outside of the family, and then they eloped and left. So I think
well, you can.
It's like when a Scientologist marries outside of the family, and someone goes, "Do you know the rest of the world thinks that?" Hey, come here, I just have a couple of articles on this internet thing to show you.
Yeah, I was only watching this the other day, but I didn't realize I was watching an interview with Princess Diana for some reason, and I didn't realize that Charles had been dating her older sister, and then gave that up. So he started dating Diana's older sister when Diana was 16, and then dumped her and dated Diana when she was 19. So we'd known her since she was like a teenager.
Even within the crown, when they tend to not marry inside of the family, they still like to keep it somewhat incestuous.
Exactly, yes. They want it as close as possible. So in 1678, two anti-Catholic propagandists called Titus Oates and Israel Tongue. I'll give you a minute to appreciate those names. But
one more time, please.
Titus Oates and Israel Tongue.
You're as tight as oats.
I'm willing to sacrifice. So they wrote a giant document detailing this Catholic conspiracy to assassinate Charles II and replace him with his brother James, who is now an open Catholic. And they hid the document in the wall of Tongue's housemate so that he would find it. But then also they told him they also told him it was there, so I don't know why they didn't just give it to him and be like, "Oh, I found this." But he was some chemist, and he brought it to Charles II and showed it to him. Charles thinks it's...
Do you mean he was a chemist, or he was just really good at being a chemist? He was some chemist.
He was some chemist, which by 1670 standards, I think just meant he like could mix liquids without dying.
He's got a big box of leeches.
Yeah. But he brings it to Charles. Charles thinks it's bullshit, but the word gets out about it, and he brings in Tongue and his housemate, and then eventually he brings in Oates. They give a deposition under oath to the magistrate Edmund Goffrey, saying that the whole thing is true.
Under oath? Surely if he was given testimony, he should have been on top of oath.
Oates claimed he'd been in Jesuit meetings where the assassination had been discussed. He said that one of the possible methods was to have the king stabbed by Irish ruffians, or that the king's physician would poison him, and somehow Oates managed to convince everyone that the so-called popish plot was real. It's good to see the old Irish ruffians getting a bone thrown to them.
You have to say that again just so I'm fully sure, because this has gone on long, so I'm just trying to keep everything in my head.
So this guy Oates, basically, like, him
and his friend Hall.
He is some history. He's a Jesuit guy, but then he has some history, and like he writes anti-Catholic propaganda, and him and his mate basically just write this giant conspiracy theory about how Catholics are going to kill Charles so that James can become king and then turn like Britain into a Catholic utopia or whatever. And
you say conspiracy theory, but
so he writes all this, and for some, like, you know, it takes hold. Basically, people start to believe it. So Oates starts giving the name of Jesuits, and eventually he's given his own goon squad to like go and round up people that he says are in on this plot. One of the high up guys that Oates accuses, they search his room and they find that he'd written a letter to like his French counterparts about wanting a more pro-France parliament. So he was tried for treason, and then in October, the magistrate that they were like dealing with, Edmund Goffrey, he turns up dead mysteriously. So people just go fucking nuts.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So and apparently like no one's ever solved like what his murder was about, but for some reason that fuels the Catholic plot. But surely if you were in on a plot to kill the King of England, you wouldn't murder the court official. He'd be the last person you'd murder.
I don't know, it's just so crazy it might work.
Yeah.
Stupid like a Guy Fawkes.
It's a good callback. So people are going wild. On the 30th of October, Charles signs in a law that bans all Catholics from within a 30k radius of London. Apart from his wife, I don't know. I couldn't find out, and like maybe he sent his wife away. But basically, if you're Catholic, you can't be within 30 kilometers of London. And then Oates kicks it up a notch, and he starts naming Catholic lords as conspirators. When November the 5th runs around, people burn effigies of the Pope for the first time, as opposed to the usual Guy Fawkes, which is a fun little tradition that we'll come back to later on in this episode. But by the end of the year, Parliament had passed the second Test Acts, which now extended the religious ban to the House of Lords. So now even the nobles were getting it. Before this, it was just like the commons couldn't be Catholic, but now even the gentry, you weren't allowed to be Catholic if you're in the House of Lords.
Oh.
But James II...
Game changer.
It is. Now the riches are getting it in the neck.
Well, that means we have to start paying attention.
Exactly. Suddenly it's become an issue. But Charles' brother James gets an exception, which is sort of bollocks. Like you can't bring in that legislation and then immediately be like, but my brother's fine. So on the 24th of November, 1678, Oates accuses the Queen of working with the physician to poison the king. The king then interrogates Oates personally and catches him in several lies. Like Oates claims to have met the regent from Spain, but Charles has met the regent from Spain. He asks him a few questions about it, and Oates clearly has no idea what the guy looks like. But then Charles arrests him because he's obviously lying through his teeth. But at this stage, it's gone too far, and Parliament have to force him to let Oates go because people love the guy or like really believe what he's talking about. So you can't. he's gone into untouchable territory. So everyone who's even suspected of being a Catholic at this stage is chased out of London. Oates is given an apartment in the city and an allowance to like run his goon squad to so he's just making up names at this stage, and like everyone he says, everyone's like, get they're in on this pot.
I'm into it.
Well, so during this time, 3 separate bills are brought to Parliament.
And what are their names? Were they brothers or was it just coincidence?
There were 3 brothers, and boy, I tell you. But each of the bills is written expressively to stop James becoming the next king after Charles. So to stop a Catholic king. Because Charles has no male heirs. So when he dies, like, the lineage is going to go to James. But in order to stop each bill, Charles just has to dissolve the parliament, which is that's a big move. And it causes the exclusion crisis in England, which results in the proper formation of two dominant political parties in Britain for the first time, the Whigs and the Tories. So this is the origin story of the Tories. The Tories were pro-James.
Are we becoming an English history podcast, Kev? Are we spreading our wings?
This is a lot of English history that leads up to, like, Irish history, because this is all tied together, right? So, well, actually, this is perfect. The next paragraph is the Irish bit. So, James Butler, who's now the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland at the time, he is given details of the assassination attempts and instructed to make arrests as part of this popish plot. Butler doesn't think the plot is real and said that the guys he was told were assassins, they're silly drunken vagabonds that no schoolboy would trust to rob an orchard.
Oh, put-downs back in the day.
Yeah. But he was also instructed to arrest the ringleaders of the plot, the Archbishop Oliver Plunkett and James and Charles's old friend Archbishop Peter Talbot. So he's the guy who'd, like, been in exile with James and Charles. He'd been chased off to Paris because he tried to make things easier for Catholics. He got sick, he was allowed back to England, and then he was allowed back to Ireland. So I think he's only been in Ireland for a couple of years. He's basically dying. And then Oates names him as one of the co-conspirators in this thing. Presumably just because he's a famous Catholic. I don't think, like, Oates is just like, who are the Archbishops of Ireland? Yes, they're in it. They're the two Catholic names I know from this other country. They're the guys. That's the one.
Also, maybe.
I think at this stage he's dying. But so Butler is sympathetic to Plunkett. But he'd never liked Peter Talbot, possibly because he kept arguing with his brother Richard. But on the 8th of October 1678, Butler signed a warrant for Talbot's arrest, and he was taken from his brother Richard's home near Maynooth. Peter became ill when he was in prison, and he died in November 1680 at the age of 60. Allegedly, he was refused a priest to administer the last rites, but Plunkett, who was in the same prison, barged in and gave them to him, which I don't think that actually happened. But it's a nice story.
Yeah, that's a nice story,
Yeah.
but probably not.
No, I don't know how Plunkett would have, like, barged through prison gates to get to his other co-conspirator.
Yeah, you might have snuck in and then read it through the bars. I don't know, but that seems like... I imagine the last rites are a few minutes long.
Yeah.
And if you barge through, like, someone will find you.
Yeah, they've got time to do it. But so during this whole thing, his old friend Charles II never does anything to help Talbot. And in August 1679, Richard Talbot ends up going into exile in France again to avoid getting locked up himself over the popish plot. So the last of the main 22 people who were executed behind the plot was Oliver Plunkett, the other archbishop. Despite having a bounty over his head because of the Test Acts, he kept preaching in your old favourite, Clogherhead.
Do you mean home to Roberto's world-famous takeaway and diner?
I literally have that written here, yes. But you started... What was his name again?
His name was Albert Cashier.
Yes.
Cashier?
It was... You talked about Oliver Plunkett a bit at the start of Albert Cashier's episode.
Yes, there was something to do with a Protestant church.
Yeah, so it was basically illegal for him to be doing what he was doing, but he was out there in Clogherhead preaching that mass and not hiding, which is, you got to respect that, but also at the same time, they arrested him and he was hung, drawn and quartered on the 1st of July in 1681. His head is still on display in Drogheda.
Bronzed or just...
Yeah.
What's the deal?
I don't know. It's still, you can go to the cathedral and see it. It's in a little glass case.
Are you sure it's not just like a bronze bust and people in Drogheda have trouble differentiating that and an actual head?
Yeah, maybe. So he's the last guy to die as part of this plot. Eventually the hysteria kind of dies down and the public starts to think, all these guys we've executed, they keep saying they're innocent. And actually, my local priest, he was pretty sane before we ran him out of town and murdered him. So in 1680, around 4% of the population of Britain aren't Church of England. And about 1.1% overall are Catholic. So it's a tiny minority. The Popish plot finally ends in August of 1681. And Oates is told to leave his apartment, but he doesn't. And he denounces the king instead. So he's arrested for sedition.
He just hauls up instead.
Oates gets hauled. But yeah, I feel like denouncing the king, that's a last ditch attempt to be like, no, you're like that's a Henry VIII. No, I'm the Pope move. Like it's either gonna pay out massive dividends or you're fucked.
I like that idea though. Like that's I'm pretty sure that's what our government just did to Sinn Féin. No, we're in charge. No, well technically no, we're in charge now.
I'm the captain now.
Look at me. Yeah. We're the captains now.
So I think, right, I'll finish up, and this last bit's going to be the end of part 1 of this story. But in February 1685, Charles II dies after converting on his deathbed to Catholicism.
Traitor.
I know. This is what everyone had feared about him, and he fucking done it. A deathbed conversion.
All along.
Because he has no legitimate male heirs. He's got male heirs because all the royals love fucking. But he's got no legitimate male heirs.
Because he's probably got a lot of Gendrys around, but no Joffreys. I suppose Joffrey wouldn't be a proper one either.
Exactly. But he so the crown passes to James II, known as James VII in Scotland, as one of his first acts.
They're just bad at counting.
Because the Stuarts had been kings in Scotland beforehand, and then like because of the royal lineage is clusterfuck.
Well, let me tell you, Kevin, stewards are not technically kings. Just ask Boromir or Faramir, because they have some very serious thoughts about that.
I'm loving the undercurrent of Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings references in this one. But so I'll finish up. One of James's first acts is that he tries oaths for perjury, and he's found guilty.
He said, it's a bit plain, better with honey and peanut butter.
He strips Oates of his clerical title. He has him whipped through London twice, and then he sentences him to life imprisonment with pillory once a year. So pillory is basically the stocks, and if you look up pillory on Wikipedia, Oates is the image for it. So he's like the poster boy for pillory. Yeah, so that's it.
The literal poster boy.
The literal poster boy. It's a good claim to fame. So once a year during his life sentence imprisonment, he's allowed out to be locked in the stocks and have shit thrown at him, and then back to prison.
Locked, stocked, and
to smoking barrels of shit. Grand. So we'll leave it there. Maybe
that seems like it might be a double parter for one.
I actually don't know how long this is. Because again, ostensibly this is the story of what happened in the Battle of the Boyne, and I was trying to lay the groundwork of like how England became Protestant and who James II. So this is James II. He's the Catholic side in the Battle of the Boyne. And I think for the next episode, we'll introduce King Billy, the Protestant side of the Battle of the Boyne. And then we'll take it from there.
Sounds good. Right, sure, then we're not sure how we're going to end up dividing these episodes up, because we're about a quarter of the way through, and we're not sure how we're going to divide all of this up. You might end up getting a full season of this, just one story, the way it's going.
I genuinely could do 5 episodes on this one story. But so we'll
it is our first season. We're going to be doing at least 15 episodes this season, so we've got loads. So,
I'd said that to you like in a message. I was like, "Man, this could be the first 15 season episode." And then the next thing I saw, you'd posted on Instagram, being like, "This is our first 15 season episode."
Yeah, I know. I gotta put you under pressure to make sure that we get all of this done.
I was being hyperbolic, but
Well, no. What happened there, Kev, was you'd said that, and I was like, "Oh, well, I already have my 5 episodes written. So how about you fucking go?" Well, technically, I have 5 stories written. If you're gonna do 5 on that one, you can do another 4, and I'll do 1 more, and then we'll have 50.
Grand, yes. I checked actually before the story. I've written 10,000 words on this, which is more than
you did for your college thesis.
More than I did for my college thesis, for sure. But Grant, so the next part of this episode will either be later this week, possibly tomorrow, probably not tomorrow, later this week or next week.
Yes, very soon.
All right.
Okay. Shafter, see you all soon.
And welcome back.
Bye. Yes. And goodbye.